Back in the day, from 774 to 775, Earth got hit with a mega blast of radiation. This crazy burst of energy left its mark. 3 rings from that year show way too high levels of radioactive stuff. But what exactly caused it? Scientists are inclined to think that the reason was a solar flare. Some folks think maybe a massive supernova caused the radiation blast. But astronomer Phil Plait says that if that had been the case, it would have had to be less than 1,000 light years away and would have had been crazy bright. But there's no record of that happening. No bright, shiny Death Star in sight. After looking at the radioactive carbon and beryllium in tree rings, scientists ruled out a bunch of other possibilities. At first, they considered that it was a smash-up between neutron stars or a neutron star and a black hole. These types of crashes produce a super quick blast of gamma rays without any light show, which lines up best with the evidence. But these kinds of collisions are super rare. Plait thinks it's kinda unlikely that this is the answer. He figures we should only see one of these events in our galaxy about once every million years. So having one just 1,200 years ago seems pretty wild. Scientists are seriously worried about these rare events. If one happened closer to Earth, it could seriously mess up life on our planet. Even if it was thousands of light years away, a similar event today could cause chaos with all the fancy electronic systems we've come to rely on. So it's a good thing those gamma ray bursts are so rare, because if they were more common, Earth might be in for a rough ride. You may think that if our planet could withstand mega radiation blasts, it can easily withstand something less frightening. Let's say grasshoppers. Sorry to say that, but it's not exactly true. Back in 1874, during a hot summer in Kansas, things took a strange turn. Grasshoppers, or should I say locusts, invaded the Great Plains like nobody's business. They came down like a storm, blanketing houses, trees, and even poor trains passing by. These bugs were on a mission to cause chaos. Farmers had to scramble to protect their wells and just about anything else worth saving. Locusts landed everywhere, wreaking havoc on everything in sight. Even poor sheep lost their wool. Locusts even stripped paint off wagons and handles off pitchforks. This is how destructive they were. Livestock tried to fight back by eating them, but there were just too many of these insects. That year, those critters caused about $200 million in crop damage. The locust invasion was so tough, even the US Army stepped in to help. In the end, locusts began to disappear, sparing the plains from further devastation. Natural disasters can be even more unexpected than radiation blasts from space and locust invasions. Check this out. Back in June 2017, a reindeer herder up in northwest Siberia was minding their own business when they suddenly heard a crazy loud blast and saw smoke shooting up from the ground. If that happened to me, I'd need to change my pants. Sorry. Later on, they found this huge hole that was like 23 feet wide and nearly 65 feet deep and was surrounded by chunks of ice and dirt. It turned out that there were over 17 such black holes in the area. They were filled with peaty water and shrouded in mystery. Some folks thought those were sinkholes. Others were sure they were left by top-secret device tests or even a bunch of meteorites. Now, the latest idea is that these holes are actually craters caused by the Arctic warming up and melting the frozen ground. The theory states that as the ground thaws, gas pockets trapped beneath the surface burst through, creating such dramatic holes. Apparently, these eerie craters have been showing up in specific spots in Siberia where ancient geological faults have been leaking out hot natural gas for ages. Combine that with some leftover methane from old lake sediments, and you've got a recipe for some explosive surprises as the planet heats up. Not scared yet? All right, maybe you're afraid of darkness, huh? If so, you wouldn't like it back in 536. It's the year when the world went through a crazy 18-month period of darkness. A mysterious fog covered Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, blocking out the sun and causing chaos. It was like the Dark Ages, but For real. It turns out that the main culprit behind this fog was a volcanic eruption in Iceland. This eruption spread ash across the northern hemisphere, causing temperatures to drop and crops to fail. People were freezing and starving. It was a mess. Historians from back in the day even talked about how weird it was. The sun looked like the moon, summers were freezing cold, and even China had summer snow. It was all because of the volcanic ash blocking out the sun. And to make things even worse, this period of darkness sparked the beginning of the bubonic plague in 541. Talk about a rough time to be alive. Let's go back to Siberia real quick. Back in 1908, way out in the wilds of Siberia, an asteroid dropped for an unexpected visit. Today, we know it as the Tunguska asteroid, but it didn't get its name instantly. Local folks only caught a glimpse of the show. A bright fireball streaking across the sky, followed by a massive boom. Trees went flying, fires blazed, and animals weren't too happy about it either. But since the area was so remote, not many folks took notice. For almost 2 decades, nobody bothered to check out the Tunguska site. People had too much on their plates back then. But then, scientists finally made it out there and found evidence of the asteroid's shenanigans. Later in expeditions, they found some spacey microparticles. Fast forward to now, and NASA has a whole planetary defense thing going on. They even sent a mission to test out asteroid deflecting tech. Because who knows when the next cosmic rock will come knocking on our door, right? In the middle of the 19th century, there was one more epic solar storm called the Carrington Event. It may not sound like a big deal to you, but it had pretty rough consequences. The next day after the storm, Earth was hit with this insane geomagnetic storm that threw telegraphs off the rails and brought auroras to the tropics. And it's the place where they normally never show up. Turns out, all this space weather madness started with weird stuff happening on the sun's surface, like sunspots. From these spots, solar flares and other crazy electromagnetic stuff can pop out and mess with our technology. Massive solar storms like this one can shoot out from the sun at speeds of up to 1,800 miles per second. They can contain billions of tons of solar material, complete with a sassy little magnetic field that loves to mess with Earth's magnetic field when they meet. Now, listen closely. We're getting close to the next solar maximum in 2025, so it's a good time to check out the history of the worst solar storms, like the Carrington Event, and take notice. Imagine if a similar storm hit today. An internet apocalypse, anyone? Businesses would be sent offline and we'd be facing some serious damages. Luckily, these mega solar storms don't happen very often. But hey, space weather is tricky to predict, so who knows when the next one will hit?
It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reached the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault. That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis like the one in 2004 are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific, and 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises: could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always, prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground.
Seen a good horror movie lately? If you're a fan of those, then you can appreciate a good plot. But what if I told you that Mother Nature is the best scriptwriter ever? Ancient disasters were scarier than any horror movie today. From tsunamis to volcanic eruptions, you'll be shocked by the scale of these events. One natural disaster you definitely don't want to experience is a tsunami. Those gigantic walls of water sweep across the coast and take out everything in their way. And it's nothing new for our planet. Scientists were able to piece together a timeline based on evidence that major tsunamis left. In northern Chile, a large boulder sits high above the Pacific Ocean. Behind it, a desert as far as the eye can see. This 44-ton stone obviously doesn't belong here. It's the result of an ancient tsunami. Waves as high as a 6-story building carried boulders like pebbles. Researchers estimate this happened in 1420. But how can they possibly know this? In the 15th century, there were no written records in the region. Time for some detective work. Archaeologists discovered that around the same time, there was a tsunami in Japan, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. The ground shook off the coast of Chile. That's how the tsunami was created. Then the wave traveled nearly 2/5 of the Earth's circumference. That's one tireless tsunami. But this wasn't a one-time event. Evidence suggests that a similar event happened 3,800 years ago. Ancient people abandoned their coastal villages around this time. They were moving inland. How did they know it was time to go? There's evidence of erosion due to strong currents, telltale signs of an ancient tsunami. As you know from school textbooks, oxygen is 21% of the air we breathe, but it wasn't always a part of Earth's atmosphere. Oxygen was missing during the first half of our planet's lifespan. Carbon dioxide and methane were the name of the game back then. CO2 is what makes our drinks fizz, but isn't the other gas dangerous? Yes, because you can't smell methane, and that's the reason there was no life on Earth billions of years ago. So how did we get from methane to oxygen? In come the cyanobacteria. This group of microbes started to evolve some 2.7 billion years ago. These tiny microbes mastered photosynthesis, converting sunlight into energy. And the byproduct of this process was, you've guessed it, oxygen. Soon it started escaping from water into the atmosphere. There, it reacted with methane, and over time, O2 replaced it completely. Scientists named this process the Great Oxidation Event. But how could it be bad? After all, we're alive thanks to it. All that oxygen acted as a poison for anaerobic organisms. And no, these are not life forms that didn't do aerobics or Pilates. The term simply means that these microorganisms didn't need oxygen to grow. Too much oxygen, and they would be goners. And that's precisely what happened. Scientists spoke of an oxygen overshoot that changed Earth's atmosphere for good. The disappearance of most anaerobic organisms was an early example of an extinction event. They didn't like the atmosphere at the time and decided to step down. But look on the bright side. They made room for oxygen-loving humans to enter the picture. Let's go to Turkey. No, not the seaside resorts that tourists visit in the summer, but the region of Anatolia in the southeast of the country. Göbekli Tepe is the world's oldest known temple site. It dates back to the Neolithic period. Scientists found a stone pillar here that tells a tale of an ancient disaster. They presume that the pillar is commemorative. Today, humans still build similar structures to mark an important event or a person. Just one example is the Washington Memorial. It was built in honor of the first American president, George Washington. But the pillar in Turkey doesn't commemorate a happy event. Scientists believe it shows a devastating occurrence, a comet crashing into the Earth. The event must have been destructive. There are also other signs on the monument. These symbols align with the setup of the night sky stars for the year 10,950 BCE. The date astounded the researchers. It matched their earlier research of an ice core sample in Greenland. This showed that a comet fragment hit our planet around the same time. The archaeological site could have easily been an ancient observatory. And whoever worked at it observed a cataclysmic event. The impact must have been so powerful that it changed the Earth's rotational axis. That's the imaginary pole going through our planet from top to bottom. That ancient comet must have packed a punch to knock the blue planet off balance. Have you heard of the city of Tal El Hammam in the valley of the Jordan River? The reason why your answer is probably no is that the city doesn't exist today. It completely disappeared around the year 1650 BCE. It was one of the three major cities in this part of the Middle East. Together, these three cities had a population bigger than Palm Springs today. At the time, Tal El Hammam was a metropolis. It even had high-rises, 5-story buildings constructed using mud bricks. But archaeologists found strange markings on them. The bricks melted as they were exposed to high temperatures. Yes, sound the fire alarm. Some sort of disaster had caused a major fire. Archaeological finds pointed to a suspect for such damage, a rock from space. So, where was the crater? This comet, or an asteroid, never made it to the ground. It was traveling at high speed, so it disintegrated before hitting the ground. Such an event is called an airburst. The largest witnessed meteor airburst happened over Tunguska in the north of Asia in 1908. Scientists estimated that the airburst in Tal El Hammam happened 2.5 miles above the city. This event released a lot of energy. Air temperature quickly rose to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to set clothes and wood on fire in an instant. Mud bricks and tools made from metal start to melt when exposed to such heat. This would explain the evidence scientists unearthed. But there was one more find: salt. The event was so powerful that it distributed salt over the region around the Dead Sea. Any farmer will tell you that salty soil and crops don't go well together. People started moving away from the area because they couldn't grow food. Imagine an island with whitewashed villages surrounded by a sapphire blue sea. Such a place exists in reality. It's the island of Santorini. But the history of this place hides a tale of destruction. The island is of volcanic origin. This means that a violent eruption created it some 3,000 years ago. Now there are two islands. The bigger one is shaped like a horseshoe. When you look at them from above, the two islands look like they form a circle. That's because they were once a single island. It had a large mountain and was round in shape. But then it all changed almost overnight. One of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history tore Santorini apart. The earth trembled, tsunamis formed, and clouds of ash filled the sky. A daunting image. People felt the eruption hundreds of miles away. When it was all over, seawater rushed into the caldera of the former volcano. That's why the water in the lagoon has such a beautiful color. Scientists know so much about Santorini's past because of an unlikely assistant, a tree. The juniper tree, to be exact. People use its aromatic wood for everything from furniture to making pencils. On the Greek island, its rings revealed the tale of the ancient eruption. As a tree grows, it doesn't only go up, it expands sideways as well. Each new layer of bark adds a ring to the trunk. It takes a year for one ring to form. And on Santorini, one ring was unnaturally pale. The scientists did the math and voila, they dated the eruption to 1560 BCE.
The snowpack over your head splits in two right in front of your eyes and starts tumbling down in the frozen slope to its resting place far, far below. Anything in its way is crushed under the immense mass of snow and debris. You're witnessing an avalanche, one of the most dangerous natural disasters. But what if I tell you about another kind of avalanche, no less blood-chilling than the mountain one? And the most bizarre thing about it is that it occurs underwater. Underwater avalanches are powerful and disastrous natural phenomena, often much more dangerous than land ones. They have the potential to wreak havoc on the entire planet, leading to catastrophic consequences. The most alarming thing? They occur all the time under the surface of the ocean, impossible to see, predict, and extremely difficult to measure. Such avalanches can get 100 times larger than land ones, and they pose a great risk to the world's communications, capable of leaving the entire planet without the internet. But we'll talk about it a bit later. First, let's go 60,000 years back into the past. We're near the northwest coast of Africa, ready to witness the colossal scale and devastating impact of a ginormous underwater avalanche. It started as a quite small underwater landslide in the Agadir Canyon. At first, it was just 0.35 cubic miles of material, but in no time, this mass increased more than 100 times in size while traveling across the Atlantic Ocean floor. As the avalanche sped up and grew, it picked up gravel, sand, rocks, and mud. It carved a devastating path through one of the world's largest submarine canyons, wiping out all forms of animal and plant life on its way. The disastrous flow was so powerful that it literally eroded a 250-mile stretch of the canyon, cutting hundreds of feet into its sides and damaging a total area of 1,740 square miles. That's the area of more than 3.5 New York cities. As for the force of the flow, it was so immense that it propelled massive boulders up the canyon walls to heights of up to 430 feet. Before scientists discovered the evidence of this catastrophic event, they had seriously underestimated the scale of destruction caused by submarine avalanches. By the way, these devastating catastrophes can start not only far away in the ocean, but also at estuaries. Let's go back to 14 January 2020 and see for ourselves. A turbidity current, a rapid, downhill flow of water containing a lot of sediment, rushed more than 680 miles from the Congo River estuary in the deep sea. This current appeared due to two factors: terrible flooding along the Congo River in late December 2019 and unusually large spring tides. This resulted in an avalanche of sand and mud. Its volume was equivalent to 1/3 of all the sediment produced annually by all the rivers in the world. This sediment avalanche accelerated, increasing in speed from 17 feet per second in the upper part of the Congo Canyon to 26 feet per second when it reached the end of the channel, almost 700 miles away from the coastline. This route made it the longest avalanche of sediment ever measured on our planet. 2 days later, the flow reached the deep ocean. The avalanche broke two seabed telecommunication cables, cutting internet data speeds all the way across West, Central, and South Africa. Now, before this disaster, scientists considered that measuring powerful deep-sea avalanches was impractical. But the sediment flow in the Congo Canyon could be monitored directly, finally allowing researchers to assess how major river floods connected to the deep sea. They also concluded that how often underwater avalanches occurred depended on where the observer was. Seafloor canyons that are close to river mouths can experience several tiny avalanches per year. Other systems, far from river discharges like the Agadir Canyon, can only have one monster of an avalanche every 10,000 years or so. You're likely wondering, what can trigger an avalanche under the surface of the ocean? Well, earthquakes, typhoons, high tides, river floods, and even volcanic eruptions. And due to our changing climate, such events become more and more frequent and intense. At the same time, these triggers don't mean that an avalanche is bound to happen, nor do they relate to the scale of the event. See for yourself. In 1755, a powerful earthquake hit the coast of Portugal, wiping out large parts of Lisbon. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives during that disaster, but it only triggered a tiny underwater avalanche. And in 1929, a large earthquake off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, triggered the largest underwater avalanche ever recorded. The flow traveled at a speed of 42 miles per hour, carrying boulders, sand, and mud. It snapped 11 seabed cables on its journey downhill. The avalanche was so powerful, it produced a tsunami that claimed the lives of 28 people along the coastline. Now, submarine avalanches are totally invisible because they happen deep under the ocean surface, which makes them extremely hard to study. But we must find a way because these flows are super important. They transport sediments, nutrients, and even pollutants across the ocean floor. So, a research team from Liverpool decided to unravel this mystery. Over the last 40 years, they've collected more than 300 samples from the ocean floor. Combined with seismic and bathymetric data, which is a fancy word for ocean mapping, they managed to reconstruct a massive submarine avalanche. It was the first time an underwater avalanche of this size was mapped out. An even cooler thing, the event itself started off pretty modestly, but it quickly evolved into a colossal avalanche that grew to more than 650 feet tall. To put that into perspective, imagine a skyscraper-sized avalanche zooming from Liverpool to London, cutting a trench 100 feet deep and 9 miles wide. Then it spread out over an area bigger than the UK, covering it with several feet of sand and mud. That's like burying a whole country. These findings are actually a big deal because they show that even a small underwater landslide can turn into something massive and super destructive. But that's not the worst. Think about undersea internet cables, which are essential for global communication. There are more than 550 active seafloor cables around the world. Their combined length is a whopping 870,000 miles. That's enough to wrap around our planet 35 times. When a submarine avalanche breaks seafloor cables, the effects are usually super expensive and devastating. For example, in 2006, an earthquake in Taiwan triggered underwater avalanches that cut loads of seafloor cables connecting Southeast Asia with the rest of the world. The largest internet operator in China had a 90% loss of traffic to the USA at the peak of the event. As for Taiwan itself, it experienced between 74 to 100% loss in traffic to neighboring islands. So now you probably get why we need to learn more about this natural phenomenon. Luckily, researchers at Tulane University have found a way to study it in 3D. Previous studies only looked at submarine avalanches in 2D, which didn't give the full picture of how they actually behaved. The new research focused on how underwater flows interacted with mini basins, natural features on the ocean floor that look like shallow bowls. Despite being called mini, these bowls can be huge, up to 4 square miles. When turbidity currents flow into these mini basins, they don't just stop. No, they hit the far side and curl back around like water eddies in a stream. These swirling flows move the sediment around before it settles on the ocean floor. The size of the mini basin and the speed of the flow can change how the current behaves. If the basin is big and the current is slow, it starts to fill up with sediment. But if you crank up the flow speed or shrink the basin, the current starts to overflow, spilling over the basin. To study all this, the researchers created a mini version of a mini basin in a pool and used different speeds of flow to simulate turbidity currents. They even made their own sediment mixtures to see how different sizes of particles would behave. In the end, they managed to mimic real-life ocean conditions, but on a smaller, manageable scale. Pretty cool, huh?
You're walking through a bustling town near the Bay of Naples. It looks full of life, energy, and healthy food. Look at these flatbreads that might have been ancient pizza, no less. The people of Pompeii are living their best lives. But all of that comes to a fiery halt in 79 CE. That's when Mount Vesuvius, that unassuming mountain looming over the city, decides it's time to make history. And the result is a tragic story that archaeologists are still piecing together 2,000 years later. Now, if you think Pompeii was some boring, dusty old place, well, think again. This was a lively, buzzing town. There were farmers bringing in fresh produce, merchants selling their goods, bakers cranking out bread and pizza-like flatbreads, and gladiators gearing up for fights in the amphitheater. The people of Pompeii loved decorating their homes with frescoes, mosaics, and statues. And food was a big deal. Pompeii was home to some of the earliest restaurants, called Thermopylae, where people could grab hot meals on the go. But let's get back to the fateful day when this beautiful, simple life ended. The saddest thing is that the people of Pompeii had warnings, they just didn't know it. Around 4 days before Vesuvius erupted, there had been minor tremors, but the locals were used to earthquakes. They had a massive one in 62 CE that destroyed lots of buildings, but they rebuilt the town and kept living there. No one thought, hey, maybe that giant mountain is the problem. So by the time 79 CE rolled around, Pompeii was back to normal, or so they thought. Now it's the morning of the eruption, just another regular day. People are working, shopping, and chilling in the baths. And then, out of nowhere, Vesuvius erupts. It was a catastrophic explosion that shot a plume of ash, gas, and rocks 20 miles into the sky. Pliny the Younger, a Roman writer who watched this disaster unfold from across the bay, wrote that it looked like a pine tree of fire and smoke rising into the heavens. Suddenly, it began raining with ash. First it was a drizzle, then it started coming in buckets. Gray, heavy rain that didn't let you breathe. Then hail began falling from the sky. But it wasn't hail. Those were pumice stones, light chunks of volcanic rock. They were smashing roofs and windows and piling up in the streets. That's when people started panicking. Some of them decided to escape, so they ran from the town. Others thought the walls of their homes would protect them. Well, they didn't. Soon things turned even worse. The ash had covered Pompeii's streets, and buildings were collapsing under its weight. But the real nightmare came early the next morning: pyroclastic flows, a fatal avalanche of superheated gas, ash, and rock that was racing down the side of a volcano at more than 200 miles per hour. The heat alone, around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, instantly finished the life of anyone who ended up in the way of the flow. When the pyroclastic flows hit Pompeii, it was, unfortunately, game over for the town. Those who decided to stay in the city didn't stand a chance. The people were trapped so quickly that their bodies were left frozen in their last moments, some shielding their faces, others holding loved ones. In one bakery, archaeologists found the skeletons of 3 people who'd stayed behind. They thought the oven's stone walls would protect them, but those just weren't strong enough to resist the elements. When the eruption finished, Pompeii was covered with 20 feet of volcanic debris. What archaeologists eventually found when they uncovered the town was both mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time. Because Pompeii was buried so suddenly, everything remained preserved: homes, streets, art, food, and even people. These days, scientists are rethinking what we know about the victims of the Pompeii disaster, thanks to new DNA evidence. Apparently, a lot of our assumptions about who these people were might be way off. A recent study by researchers from the US and Italy has shaken things up. They found that some of the victims, who they assumed were family members, weren't related at all. On top of that, the gender of some individuals was misidentified. The researchers believe that older interpretations were influenced by modern ideas about gender and relationships, which might have clouded the actual history. One of the study's co-authors from the University of Florence pointed out that conclusions based on limited evidence often reflect the biases of the time. Back then, researchers had to rely on the physical appearance of casts to make their guesses. Now, with DNA evidence, the story looks very different. Let's look at the case of the so-called family found in the House of the Golden Bracelet, which was discovered in 1974 on a Pompeii hillside. This group of 4 victims was named after an elaborate piece of jewelry was found on one of them. Based on the cast, one of the figures, who was holding a child, was assumed to be a mother. But the DNA results revealed this person was, in fact, a man. Even more surprising, none of the individuals were related, as scientists thought previously. Not surprising, given the extreme confusion and terror the people experienced as they desperately took shelter anywhere they could. Another interesting finding involves a pair of victims once thought to be sisters or a mother and daughter. DNA evidence now suggests that one of them was biologically male. Altogether, the researchers have analyzed the remains of 14 individuals for this study, and this is just a small portion of more than 1,000 victims of Mount Vesuvius's eruption that have been found so far. Archaeologists in Pompeii have also made one more discovery. Look at this figure. Initially, everyone believed that this man had been crushed by a massive boulder, a stone block that might have been part of a door frame during the eruption. His skull, with its mouth open as if in a final gasp, was found near his body. He was probably trying to escape all the chaos when it happened. But new evidence suggests that wasn't the case. His demise was likely the result of asphyxiation from a pyroclastic flow. For a long time, people thought Vesuvius erupted on August 24th. That's what some evidence seemed to suggest. But over the years, archaeologists started finding evidence that pointed to a later date. For example, they found graffiti dating back to late October and food remains, such as pomegranates. Such products wouldn't have been around in August yet. Plus, they found heating braziers in homes. Who would need extra heat in the summer of Italy? So, most experts agree that the eruption happened in late October. Now, it turns out that not everyone in Pompeii passed away. Scientists think that 15,000 people lived in the town, and only about 2,000 of them didn't survive the disaster. It means thousands of people managed to escape. But at the same time, their lives changed forever. They didn't have homes to come back to. Imagine fleeing your home with nothing but the clothes on your back, leaving behind everything you've ever known. Some survivors made it to nearby cities like Naples, but they had to start over from scratch. But recently, archaeologists made a pretty cool discovery. a fresco of a flatbread that might have been the ancient ancestor of pizza. Researchers found this painting in a house near a bakery. It shows a round bread sitting on a silver platter next to a goblet. They think people might have eaten this bread with fruits like pomegranates or dates, or maybe topped with spices or a kind of pesto. But the coolest part is that Pompeii is just 14 miles from Naples, which is the modern home of pizza. The director of Pompeii pointed out how this discovery connected a simple poor man's dish from ancient times to the modern pizza we all know and love. Today, Pompeii is one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world. Every year, new discoveries help us understand Roman life of those times even better.
You type Tonga Cliff Mystery into Google and this pops up. A rock. Yep, just a rock. At least at first glance. But it gets weird once you realize this is actually a 2-story tall boulder perched on top of a 120-foot high cliff in Tonga. And it's chilling there, at a whopping 128 feet above sea level. So, how the heck did this rock get there? First, a proper introduction. This is Makalahi, which means big rock in Tongan. This name hits the nail on the head because this baby stands at about 22 feet tall. That's taller than a giraffe standing on its tiptoes. And it weighs over 1,300 tons. And that's like stacking nearly 325 elephants on a giant scale. With those massive measurements, it makes total sense that the locals call it Makalahi. But from now on, we can also think of it as the giant tsunami rock. And to understand why, I've got to tell you the story of Makalahi in Tonga. In 2024, researchers from the University of Queensland's School of the Environment were exploring the southern side of Tongatapu Island. One day, they were chatting with a group of local farmers who mentioned a strange and massive rock sitting up on a cliff. And they were honestly pretty surprised. After all, it didn't make any sense for such a huge boulder to be located that far inland, especially since it's sitting about 656 feet away from the edge of the cliff. On top of that, it was covered in vegetation and surrounded by overgrowth, which suggests it's been sitting there for a long time. That's when they started asking themselves the big question: where did this rock even come from? So to figure it out, the team created a 3-dimensional model of the boulder and headed to the coast. After some careful research, they finally found the spot where the boulder could have originated. Turns out it broke off from a cliff more than 90 feet above sea level. Alright, so they found the source, but let's take a moment to recap what we know so far. The rock originally came from a spot about 98 feet above sea level, and now it's sitting at 128 feet above sea level. That's a pretty big jump. Sure, it's not like climbing Mount Everest or anything, but come on, it's a rock. It didn't just grab some gear and climb up there by itself. That brings us back to the big question. How did this massive boulder get up there? Well, it was probably moved by a tsunami. Yep, this rock could actually be solid ancient evidence of a tsunami. You see, we're talking about Tonga, an island country in Polynesia, part of Oceania. It's made up of nearly 170 islands, with about 36 of them inhabited. The country is divided into 3 main island groups: the Vava'u, Ha'api, and Tongatapu archipelagos. The entire region sits right at the junction of 2 major tectonic plates, the Indo-Australian plate to the west and the Pacific plate to the east. It's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, that giant horseshoe-shaped zone that wraps around the ocean basin. And if there's one thing we know about the Ring of Fire, is that it's packed with intense geological activity. With lots of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions happening all the time, and those events can absolutely trigger catastrophic tsunamis. Tonga is no exception. According to Dr. Annie Lau, a coastal geomorphologist who took part in the study, Tonga has a long history of tsunamis for exactly that reason. Take the tsunami that hit the country at the beginning of 2022, for example. That catastrophic event produced waves as high as 66 feet, with water pushing nearly 0.62 miles inland. It was so powerful that, tragically, it claimed the lives of at least 6 people, and it was actually triggered by a volcanic eruption. So yeah, tsunamis are pretty common in Tonga, thanks to all that magma and tectonic activity constantly happening beneath the surface. And a massive, powerful wave is likely what carried Makalahi up onto the cliff. According to the study, this event may have happened around 7,000 years ago. That's even older than the first human settlement in Tonga, which is believed to have occurred roughly 3,000 years ago. Interestingly, that estimated timeline lines up with evidence of a massive tsunami that hit New Zealand's North Island, around 1,300 miles southwest of Tonga. The researchers had a theory. Now all they had to do was run the numbers to see if it was actually possible. So they measured the boulder's size and weight, then used that data to model how big a wave would have to be to push such a massive rock that far inland. Their findings suggest the boulder may have originally sat near the edge of a cliff, but was shoved inland by a tsunami. The wave lasted about 90 seconds and reached up to 164 feet in height. That's almost as tall as Niagara Falls. Just to give you a perspective, that's significantly larger than the waves recorded during the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 or the Tohoku tsunami in 2011. Now, here's the thing. These tsunamis were triggered by earthquakes, and waves caused by earthquakes usually top out at just a few tens of feet. So, in Makalahi's case, it probably wasn't an earthquake that did the job. Instead, it's possible the wave came from a landslide tsunami. This theory suggests that the earthquake not only generated a tsunami that flooded the island, but it probably also triggered a massive landslide. When a huge chunk of material suddenly slides into the ocean or something shifts quickly underwater, it can create a landslide-triggered tsunami, and that landslide, in turn, may have produced a second tsunami. One powerful enough to carry Makalahi and drop it where it still sits today. Now, while science may have found a likely explanation for how the rock got to such a strange location, many locals will probably continue to pass down the traditional stories tied to rocks like this one. According to Polynesian mythology, coastal boulders like Makalahi were placed by the legendary hero Maui. In some legends, Maui used a giant boulder and a magical rope made from the hair of the deity Hina to anchor the sun and slow it down. Another story is known as the Maui Throwing Stones. It refers to a group of 8 coral limestone boulders located in the village of Havelukilu on Tongatapu. The myth mentions that these massive stones were thrown to Havelukilu by Maui from the neighboring island of Eua. The story goes that Maui was annoyed by a rooster that woke him up every morning, so he picked up stones and hurled them at the bird. And that's how the rocks from Eua ended up in Tongatapu. Now here's the interesting part. The term white chicken in Tongan also means foaming waves, so some believe this story may actually be a metaphor for a tsunami. Even though these myths don't mention Makalahi directly, they show how important rocks like these are to local people. Now, we can say that this archaeological evidence is not only important for culture, but also for science. The recent study gives us some fascinating theories about how the rock ended up so high up and so far inland. But researchers still need to find what's called a landslide scar to prove their point and fully solve the Tonga Cliff mystery. Follow-up research is crucial because it will help us to uncover what triggers these kinds of events and how often that might happen. And who knows? One day we might come across new cases of giant rocks moved by giant tsunamis, each one carrying its own story from the deep.
In November 2020, something terrifying happened in the ocean near British Columbia. Out of nowhere, a massive wave, as tall as a 4-story building, rose up and tossed a lonely little buoy way up in the air. Scientists later confirmed that it was the most extreme rogue wave ever recorded. Such a wave is so rare that experts think that something like that might only happen once every 1,300 years. Interestingly, if that buoy hadn't been floating there at just the right time, we might have never known this wave even happened. For a long time, people thought rogue waves were just sailor stories, something like scary tales passed around on ships. But in 1995, everything changed. On New Year's Day, a monstrosity of a wave 85 feet tall slammed into an oil platform off the coast of Norway. Scientists were shocked, since their models had never predicted a wave that big. That wave became known as the Doppler wave, and that was the first proof that rogue waves were real. Since then, scientists have spotted more of those giant waves, even in lakes. The one near a place called Ucluelet on Vancouver Island was special, not because it was the tallest, but because it was lots bigger than the waves around it. You see, to be called a rogue wave, a wave has to be more than twice as tall as the ones nearby. The Doppler wave was about twice the height of the other waves around it. But the Ucluelet wave? It was nearly 3 times taller than its neighbors. When scientists said this made it probably the most extreme rogue wave ever recorded. Now imagine a huge wall of water suddenly rising in the middle of a calm sea. That's the kind of ocean drama we're talking about. Very few rogue waves have ever been seen with human eyes, especially not ones that extreme. Scientists are still trying to understand how these monster waves form so that they can get better at predicting them before they strike. To do that, they track rogue waves in real time and run computer models to see how wind and water team up to create such powerful surges. Now, the giant wave off Ucluelet was picked up by a special buoy floating offshore. That buoy wasn't alone. It was part of a whole network placed out at sea by a research group called Marine Labs. Their goal is to learn more about the dangerous surprises the deep ocean can throw at us. Even when rogue waves happen far from land, they're still a serious threat. They can smash into ships, damage offshore wind farms, or wreck oil rigs. And if they come close enough to the coast, they can easily put people at the beach in danger, like it happened in April 2025 in Australia. Thankfully, the Ucluelet wave didn't hurt anyone, and neither did the famous Doppler wave before it. But other rogue waves haven't been so harmless. Back in the 1970s, some ships vanished without a trace. And now, scientists think freak waves might have been to blame. Bits of wreckage were sometimes found later. They were torn apart as if struck by a massive wall of water. Scientists think we could see more of these waves in the future, and this prediction is quite alarming. A 2020 study predicted that wave heights in the North Pacific might rise as the climate continues to change. That means the Ucluelet wave's record might not last as long as once expected. To make things even more intense, new research suggests these waves can be up to 4 times taller than scientists used to believe. And honestly, it sounds terrifying. Imagine sailing in the middle of the ocean and seeing a sky-high wall of water rising out of nowhere in front of your eyes. And rogue waves appear just like that, unexpectedly, unpredictably in the open ocean. While there's no exact size that makes a wave a rogue wave, they've been measured anywhere from 26 feet, like a 2-story house, to more than 80 feet tall. These waves are super steep, have sharp towering peaks, and can be strong enough to damage ships or oil rigs. But what causes them? That's where it gets tricky. There isn't just one thing that makes a rogue wave happen. They can form when different wave systems crash into each other. Think of it like a bunch of waves from different directions suddenly lining up just right, and boom! They combine into one huge wave that's way taller than usual. Other things can help too, like fast ocean currents, strong shifting winds, or certain underwater features like reefs or deep channels. Those can force waves into a small space, making them stack up. And still, when scientists know all these ingredients, rogue waves are still super rare and really hard to predict. Rogue waves aren't the same as tidal waves or tsunamis. Even though rogue waves can be just as dangerous, they occur for different reasons. Tidal waves happen because the moon and sun pull on Earth's water, making oceans rise and fall. Tsunamis happen when earthquakes, volcanoes, or big underwater landslides push giant waves across the ocean. Rogue waves, on the other hand, suddenly show up out of nowhere in the open sea. Big ships and oil rigs are built to handle waves up to about 50 feet tall. But rogue waves often get even bigger than that. That's why they can cause a lot of damage. For example, in December 2022, a huge rogue wave slammed into the cruise ship Viking Polaris near Antarctica. It broke windows, hurt some people, and sadly, even led to the loss of one life. Rogue waves have caused other accidents too. That's how dangerous they really are. These days, scientists know for sure that such waves happen way more often than you can imagine. I'm talking about one rogue wave for every 10,000 normal waves. Studies also show that waves have been getting bigger over the years. Still, rogue waves are tough to predict because we don't have enough information and they come up so fast. Now, even though rogue waves occur in the oceans all around the world, some places get more of them. One is near South Africa, where a strong current called the Agulhas flows. Another is the North Atlantic Ocean, where big currents like the Gulf Stream meet. Rogue waves have also been spotted in parts of the South Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. But even if you live far away from those places, don't relax just yet. Rogue waves can happen in big lakes too. A famous example is the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, a giant iron ore freighter that sank in Lake Superior during a storm in 1975. The lives of all 29 crew members were lost, and a rogue wave might have caused the ship to sink. And that's not the only disaster caused by a rogue wave. Before scientists started measuring these waves, many shipwrecks had been mysteries. Now, some experts believe rogue waves caused some of them. For example, the USS Cyclops disappeared in 1918. The culprit could have been a rogue wave. Other ships, like the Norwegian tanker Wilstar in 1974 and the German freighter MS München in 1978, were hit by huge waves too. The Andrea Gale, a fishing boat lost in 1991, was probably sunk by a rogue wave too. Even modern cruise ships have been hit by giant waves. Rogue waves are, and were, quite popular among artists too. The famous Japanese artwork, Under the Wave off Kanagawa, shows a huge wave that many people think is a tsunami. But experts think it might actually be a rogue wave caused by wind. Rogue waves also appear in movies. For example, take the 2006 movie Poseidon. In it, a giant rogue wave hits a luxury cruise liner, which is making a transatlantic crossing. And as we see, it's something strange, unexpected, and way more mysterious than any other wave caused by the ground shaking. Ocean waves can grow much bigger than we ever thought and be far more dangerous than we realized. People used to believe that waves only moved in two dimensions, just up and down, like when you draw them on paper. However, a recent study shows that waves are three-dimensional structures, able to move in different directions. This finding indicates that the ocean is more complex than we imagined, and today's ships, wind farms, oil rigs, and other structures near the coast might not be ready for what is coming. First things first, waves break. It might seem obvious, but the truth is that we don't fully understand how and why that happens, and don't know all the steps involved. What we do know is that when waves break, they change shape and become steeper. To better understand this process, researchers initially assumed that waves were two-dimensional. This assumption was necessary because it made it easier to study waves, whether in theory or through computer simulations and experiments. But here's the thing. Saying that waves are two-dimensional doesn't really capture what ocean waves are like. When most people think about waves, they imagine typical, non-threatening waves you see at the beach. But the ones we're talking about here happen in open water and form when waves coming from all different directions meet up. This wild meeting occurs under certain conditions at the ocean, like in a spot where two seas meet, or when winds suddenly change direction, like during a hurricane. When waves from two different directions come together, it creates this three-dimensional wave. To test how these unique waves behave and how they could make the ocean more dangerous for us, two researchers built a special tank, like a giant swimming pool, measuring 82 feet wide and 6.5 feet deep. All around this tank, they installed 168 mechanical paddles. These paddles act like giant hands, pushing the water back and forth to create waves, just like you would if you moved your hand through water in a bathtub. Stop the video and go do that right now. No, wait, I'm kidding. Anyways, The paddles can generate waves of varied sizes and shapes. Plus, they absorb incoming waves so that they don't bounce around the pool and mess up the tests. Beneath the tank, they put 28 huge fans that push water across the tank to simulate ocean currents, mimicking how ocean water moves. Altogether, they circulate around 2,400,000 liters of water in the tank. All of this was done to create a kind of mini-ocean, controlled by some really cool technology. Great! Everything was set, and it was time to test. The experiment has shown us that three-dimensional waves can become twice as steep as two-dimensional waves before breaking. Let me explain. So, the normal waves you see on the beach break when they reach a very steep angle. They have a limit, a maximum steepness, if you will. When that limit is crossed, the wave breaks. So, what this study is telling us is that waves in the open ocean can get as much as 80% steeper than this limit before they start breaking. That also means they can get almost twice as high as normal waves before they start to break. But the researchers found something else that was interesting. Normally, when a wave breaks, it creates a white cap, that foamy part you see on top, and once it breaks, it's done. There's no going back. It's lost its energy. But when these multi-dimensional waves break, there is no white cap. They can only keep growing. That happens because the wave's energy isn't just concentrated in one direction, allowing waves to continue growing even after reaching the steepness limit when they're supposed to break. It's like these three-dimensional waves can redistribute energy and continue building up in the middle of the ocean. That means that together, these waves can grow 4 times steeper and larger than what we previously thought was possible. So, we are talking about bigger, massive waves that can suddenly appear in the middle of the ocean. It sounds scary to say the least. That's why, for our own safety, it's important to understand how this phenomenon occurs. Maybe buildings and homes along the beach aren't at such high risk from this. But these giant waves can pose a bigger threat to things that are in the middle of the sea, like oil rigs, wind farms, and boats. This finding raises significant questions about whether these constructions, as we design them today, are safe and could handle such extreme wave patterns. The thing is, sailors have been trying to warn us about this for centuries. In the 19th century, a French explorer named Jules Dumont d'Urville, I gave it a shot. He reported seeing rogue waves over 100 feet high during his voyages. Even though he was very experienced and respected, plus 3 other people confirmed that it had indeed happened, his story was discredited. Like this account, all other stories about massive and wild waves in the middle of the ocean were dismissed as myths, just tales sailors told to make their adventures sound more exciting. Hey, don't we all? Scientists only started taking these reports seriously in 1995, when a rogue wave was finally measured for the first time. The terrifying event happened at a gas platform in the North Sea, about 100 miles off the coast of Norway. The structure was built to withstand a wave of 64 feet, and even then, they thought a wave that big would only happen once every 10,000 years. But they definitely weren't ready for what happened on New Year's Day, when a monstrous 85-foot wave, 21 feet taller than predicted, hit the platform. In a more recent case from 2018, 8 men were on a 61-foot fishing vessel over 400 miles northeast of Hawaii's Big Island when they suddenly got hit by a pair of rogue waves. One hit the back of the boat and the other slammed into the side. It was too much to handle. A lot of water came over the top, flooding the boat and pulling it down to the depths. The crew had to abandon the ship and get into a lifeboat immediately. Thankfully, they were all rescued with no injuries at all. These are just a few examples showing that our current oil platforms and ships might not be prepared for massive rogue waves. That's why experts suggest that one solution could be for ship designers to make ships strong enough to withstand double the significant wave height. However, they'd probably need some convincing because of the increased costs. So, here is a pretty convincing fact. It's believed that between 2011 and 2018, 210 waves of this type were recorded around the world, but it's very likely that the real number is much higher. What triggers rogue waves is still somewhat of a mystery, but we know they are not caused by movement on the seabed. Instead, they seem to be more related to bad weather. In Tampa Bay, for example, most rogue waves come in from the west, especially when it's stormy or windy. But we can't say this is the main cause everywhere in the world, as experts believe there could be several other factors at play. What is really concerning is that rogue waves can strike without warning. The open sea can be completely calm when suddenly the whole scene turns into a fight for survival. So, can we actually predict this phenomenon? It looks like we can. In a very recent study, researchers created a computer system that uses measurements from buoys to predict unusually large waves 5 minutes before they happen. It can catch about 3 out of 4 rogue waves. While the system does have some false alarms, the researchers say that from a safety standpoint, knowing a rogue wave might happen is better than not knowing. And I think we can all agree on that. Now, forget about the Kraken and monsters from the deep. I know, it's hard, but try. And you can forget about the Bermuda Triangle and other marine anomalies. They are nothing compared to rogue waves. Giant walls of water that suddenly appear and just as suddenly disappear on the sea surface. The destructive power of this phenomenon remained a mystery to humankind for a long time, but it appears that scientists have solved this secret. A rogue wave is a wave that exceeds at least twice all the surrounding waves. If you imagine the world ocean like a video game, then ordinary waves are your opponents. But the rogue one is a super boss. For centuries, hundreds and thousands of ships have gone missing during their voyages. People have made up a lot of legends about what was the cause of marine disasters. Sea monsters, underwater anomalies, mermaids? But today, scientists are increasingly inclined to believe that rogue waves are the main cause of unusual shipwrecks and missing ships. Some believe sailor stories about anomaly waves, while others didn't. But no one could prove their existence. However, everything changed in 1995, when a giant wall of water 85 feet high collapsed on an oil production platform off the coast of Norway. The waves around this monster were 39 feet high. In other words, the monster wave was about the size of a 9-story building, and the neighboring ones measured about 4 floors high. The oil platform wasn't destroyed, but the wave showed it could cause considerable damage to any buildings. Immediately after that, people began to study the phenomenon of rogue waves. However, in the beginning, instead of answers, scientists got even more questions. So, what's so mysterious about this phenomenon? We know how ordinary waves work. What's the problem with finding out the nature of rogue ones? Well, in fact, the difference between them is huge. Ordinary coastal waves are very predictable. They form because of the wind and the uneven landscape of the seabed. Depending on the depth, terrain, distance to the shore, and wind strength, the size and speed of the wave increase. These waves are safe. If they're not big, you can surf. If they are big, then you'll see them in advance and run out of the water, like me. Rogue ones, unfortunately, are almost unpredictable. They can appear suddenly, even during a calm sea. They appear not only on the coastline, but also in the open ocean, like a high-water cliff. The conditions for the appearance of these monsters are very chaotic. When several waves combine their energy into one, it creates a rogue wave. But this process cannot be predetermined or predicted. How is this energy formed? How is it released? And how much of this energy is needed? The questions are too complicated. Now, to try to figure it out, you can place a special buoy with sensors that scan wave data in the water. Then, you need to wait for the rogue wave to appear. And you don't know if it's going to happen or not. Fortunately, it happened off the coast of Vancouver Island. This monster, which was named the Ukulele wave, was 3 times the size of the surrounding waves and had a height of 58 feet. Proportionately, it was one of the most gigantic rogue waves ever recorded. And do you think that buoy with sensors helped to determine the nature of rogue waves? Of course not. It just showed the wave's data. In order to solve the mystery, a group of scientists from the University of Melbourne went to Antarctica, and this time they managed to find something. They brought the most modern equipment for studying weather conditions in water. They installed powerful stereo cameras on the icebreaker ESA Swarm 2 and obtained three-dimensional images of the ocean surface. Now, observation showed that the formation of rogue waves began when small waves were most susceptible to wind. That is, waves of varied sizes and directions meet the wind, which makes several small waves combine with one large one. It grows faster using this received energy. This is not just a combination of waves, but also their physical effect on one another. Scientists call this nonlinear effects. To get closer to the solution, the scientists also used the fourth-order Stokes theory, which speaks about more complex interactions of waves and their energy accumulation. The theory didn't help much, but it made the whole study more strange. Scientists realized that small waves fed off one another. Then some waves became bigger than the rest and took away all the energy. This process is called modulation instability, and it explains why rogue waves appear so suddenly, as if out of nowhere. Still, scientists admit that even this information isn't enough for them to fully explain these giant waves. Now, long story short, oops, too late, the wind pushes younger waves together, causing them to grow higher and increasing their speed. One wave steals the energy from the rest, and boom! A giant rogue wave appears, looking disproportionately huge compared to the others. It hits a boat, an oil rig, or the surface of the ocean and spills out all that energy. And that's it, silence again. The existence of such a phenomenon has convinced scientists that rogue waves are the cause of many shipwrecks at sea. Now, seriously, think for yourself. When a ship gets into a storm, the captain reports it by radio and makes records in the logbook. But when a ship suddenly disappears from radar without any warnings about harsh weather, then it might have met a giant rogue wave. They're not tied to any particular location. They are sudden and unpredictable, and this makes them some of the greatest dangers in the ocean. So, what do we do now? How can ships, beaches, and oil production stations be protected? How to predict the appearance of a wave? Well, the answer is crest-trough correlation. It sounds incredibly difficult, but it's actually simple. The highest part of the wave is the crest. The lowest part of the wave is the trough. The idea is to measure how closely the ridges relate to the troughs. With strong correlation, waves form in dense groups. There are several regular waves and one or two large ones in the center. These conditions are ideal for the appearance of a rogue wave. Now, it seems obvious that scientists should use some instruments to measure the troughs and crests on the waves. It seems quite complicated, but in fact, these crest-to-trough correlations can be studied by watching the weather and currents. Scientists hope that they'll be able to predict the appearance of rogue waves using the same systems they need to predict the weather. So, you can take a breath. It seems we're safe. Or not. Given how the weather of our planet is changing, scientists expect an increase in wave height in the North Pacific Ocean. This will contribute to the appearance of giant rogue waves, even bigger than the ones people observed off the coast of Norway. How much bigger? 1.5 times? 2 and 3 times? Well, you better sit down. Scientists conducted experimental studies and found out that these waves can get 4 times larger than previously thought. Could the 85-foot-high wave recorded in 1995 be 4 times taller? It's hard to believe, but let's just imagine it theoretically. A rogue wave with a height of 340 feet may appear in the middle of a storm. This is more than the height of the Statue of Liberty from the pedestal to the tip of the torch. Such a giant wave can pull any ship underwater in a second and easily destroy an oil station. It can throw the Kraken or Megalodon out of the ocean like a stuffed toy. But how is it different from a tsunami? Well, a tsunami is born during seismic activity at the seabed. Such a wave grows, gains speed, and then crashes onto the shore. It's predictable, and you can spot it from afar. So let's hope that scientists will be able to predict the appearance of rogue waves in advance and warn ships not to sail into the risk zone. Ordinary people who live in coastal towns and relax on the beach are also at risk. In the future, they will have to look not only at the weather forecast, but also at the risk of giant waves. A 4-story wall of water that only rises once in 1,300 years was recorded off the west coast of Canada. Some people blame waves like this for disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. Rogue waves can get strong enough to sink container ships and oil rigs. The Canadian water monster didn't hurt anyone, but it did become a sensation. And it looks like we're about to see even higher and more powerful rogue waves in the future. The team of Marine Labs, the company that operates the buoy that got caught in the Ucluelet wave, couldn't believe the data they saw. A huge force came out of the blue, pulled the buoy down, and then set it up to a peak before taking it even deeper. They thought it must be a rogue wave, so they sent the data to a scientist at the University of Victoria who specializes in these beauties. They analyzed the data and confirmed it was indeed not a technical mistake. The wave officially became the most extreme rogue wave ever officially recorded, as it was 3 times the height of waves around it. Scientists have reported seeing giant waves coming out of the blue for centuries, but no one really believed them. Back in 1826, a French scientist and naval officer was crossing the Indian Ocean on his ship, the Astrolabe. They got in a terrible storm and saw several waves over 98 feet tall. It's almost as tall as a 10-story building. The crew lost one of its members, but the 4 of them, including the captain, made it to land and shared what they saw. But back then, scientists were sure waves couldn't be taller than 30 feet. Everyone took their story as a tall tale. Pun intentional. Over a century later, a cargo ship, the MS München, mysteriously disappeared. People believed it to be unsinkable, just like the Titanic, so it was a real shock that all that was left of it was one lifeboat. When experts analyzed the damage, they concluded that it must have been hit by a wave that was around 65 feet high. Witnesses shared many other stories of giant waves coming out of nowhere, but scientists officially recognized the first rogue wave only in 1995. It went down in history as the Doppner wave, or the New Year's wave. This monster on the North Sea that was 84 feet tall hit the Norwegian gas platform Doppner on New Year's Day. It was twice larger than the wave surrounding it. The rig was built to withstand waves up to 64 feet tall and had the most advanced sensors for its time. The wave wasn't like any other type of wave they'd studied before. So they had to admit rogue waves were real and gave them an official definition. It's a wave more than twice as tall as others around it. It can pop up lightning fast in a stormy sea, or show up out of nowhere in calm waters. These waves have steep sides and a deep trough below, and look like a wall of water rising out of the sea. They're so intense that they can even swallow up rescue helicopters trying to do their job. In 2007, America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration made a list of 50 historical maritime tragedies that were most likely caused by rogue waves. Some of the events on the list happen not in the open water, but in lakes. Lake Superior has something that's got the name Three Sisters. It is a series of 3 large waves, one after another. The second wave covers the ship's decks before the first one is gone. The third wave jumps in and adds extra water. These 3 sisters overload the ship. There's a theory that this phenomenon took down the freighter Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. There are 2 main theories trying to explain how rogue waves happen. First, we've got the linear addition theory. Imagine waves cruising through the ocean at their own speeds. When these waves cross paths, they team up and become stronger to turn into a rogue wave. Then there's the nonlinear focusing theory. It says waves like to roll in groups, and when they spend time together, they exchange some energy. Sometimes, this energy exchange turns into a rogue wave. To predict the formation of these freaky waves, scientists would need an innovative radar system to keep a constant eye on the waves near a boat. They'd collect all the data and put in a math model that would create a real-time picture of what the ocean surface looks like at that very moment. This model would need to do new calculations of the surface situation every 5 minutes. It would let the crew know if there were any extreme waves coming up in the next several minutes. Such a system doesn't exist yet, but there is a huge progress in this direction. Scientists from the University of Melbourne went on an expedition to Antarctica and found out that strong winds play a big role in the creation of rogue waves. It looks like they're caused by a mix of strong winds and the random way waves move and interact with each other. This idea was tested in labs before, but now they've proven it happens in real oceans too. To study these waves, the scientists use special 3D cameras. These cameras work like human eyes, taking lots of images in a row to create a detailed 3D picture of the ocean surface. It showed that rogue waves happen more often when waves are young, which means they're just starting to form and are more affected by the wind. When strong winds blow over young waves, they make the waves taller, longer, and faster, but not evenly. Some waves steal energy from nearby waves and grow much bigger, which is how rogue waves form. The scientists noticed these giant waves happened about once every 6 hours. They recorded no rogue waves in calmer seas, when the wind doesn't have as much influence. Scientists are concerned that rogue waves may happen more often in the future because there's more energy in the atmosphere and ocean. It looks like rogue waves can be much more powerful than scientists ever thought. They managed to create the famous Doppler wave in a lab for the first time in 2018. This helped them study these mysterious waves up close and showed that their secret is in how they form. We think of waves rolling gently on a beach, but the waves in this study happen in open water when waves from different directions meet. When waves come together from far apart directions, they push the water upward, creating what's called a partially standing wave or a cross wave. This can happen when two seas meet, or when wind directions suddenly change, like during a hurricane. The study found that the bigger the angle between the meeting waves, the taller the cross wave becomes. Normally, when a wave breaks, it forms a white foamy top, and that's where it stops growing. But if a wave is formed by water coming from many directions, it can keep growing even after breaking. These special waves can grow to be twice as steep while breaking, which is already much bigger than normal waves. And if you add up all the growth from waves coming together, they can become 4 times steeper than what anyone thought was possible. This discovery could change the way we build things, like wind turbines or oil platforms in the ocean, to make them safe. Right now, many designs don't fully account for these huge multi-directional waves. Now, they seem to have a lot of similarities, but rogue waves aren't the same as tsunamis. Tsunamis happen when there's a big shift in water, like an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or landslide. They mess with the entire water column. At sea, you might not even notice a tsunami cruising beneath you, but near the shore, as it hits shallow waters, those waves can shoot up to crazy heights. Rogue waves are formed at the surface level, although sometimes they can form deep below, and these are called rogue internal waves.
If you think about the most dangerous lake in the world, what comes to your mind? A lake full of monsters like Loch Ness? A lake with a portal to another dimension? A lake with acid or poisonous jellyfish? It's scary, but none of this is even close to the level of danger that Lake Kivu, located near the city of Goma in Central Africa, poses. This calm, beautiful lake can lead to one of the most devastating disasters on the planet. But to better understand what exactly is going on here, let's take a look at Mount Nyiragongo, which is located nearby. It's one of the most active volcanoes in Africa. On May 22, 2021, it began spitting out lava that flowed directly onto the crowded city of Goma. The eruption destroyed many homes. About 500,000 locals were forced to leave their homes. It was a major humanitarian disaster. But time passed. The crisis softened, and the volcano calmed down. It seemed that everything was okay, but then scientists began to worry about something else. This something else turned out to be much more dangerous than an erupting volcano, and it was something that was at the bottom of Lake Kivu. Some people call this lake a geological anomaly because of its composition. Underwater, the lake hides dozens of cubic miles of dissolved carbon dioxide. more than 10 cubic miles of methane soaked in toxic hydrogen sulfide. This is an incredibly dangerous and extremely explosive mixture. It's like a giant tank of kerosene the size of the Grand Canyon. At any moment, a spark can occur next to this barrel. In the case of Kivu, this spark may be seismic activity. The eruption of Mount Nyiragongo could also have triggered the outburst, but the lake stayed calm, and the disaster fortunately didn't happen. Let's make a small digression. You probably know what greenhouse gases are. These are water vapor, methane, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and others. They stay in the atmosphere, retaining heat coming from the sun. This is something like a glass greenhouse that lets in sunlight, but doesn't allow plants, fruits, and vegetables to heat up. The sun sends a huge amount of heat to our planet. Such energy would burn Earth if it didn't have greenhouse gases. They let the heat pass, but only in a certain amount needed to maintain life. It's difficult to imagine how many greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere, and all these gases come up from below, from the surface of our planet. Now, let's go back to our lake. Scientists say that Kivu holds an amount of gas equal to approximately 5% of the annual greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And while these gases help us in the atmosphere, they are dangerous for humans. If they escape from the lake, they will fill the entire surrounding valley. Millions of people, animals, birds, almost all living creatures are at risk. Scientists studying this issue have stated that the Kivu Lake disaster can lead to one of the worst natural humanitarian crises in history. Now, don't panic. Let's find out how we can stop the disaster. Greenhouse gas emissions from the bottom of a lake are a rare geological phenomenon called a limnic eruption. What is it, and how does it differ from a regular volcanic eruption? In some tectonically active regions, volcanic gases seep upward from the depths of our planet. Sometimes they come across some water on their way. In our case, this water is Lake Kivu. This lake is deep, and the water at its bottom and at the surface doesn't mix with seasonal temperature changes. Well, you know how hot air always rises? It's the same with water. When the water is warm at the top and cold at the bottom in summer, it hardly moves. But with the onset of cold weather, the water becomes colder and denser, and winds help mix it up. But in the case of Lake Kivu, there's no such mixing, and the gas coming from the bowels of Earth accumulates at the cold bottom. Besides, the water above is pressing on it with its mass. As a result, gases coming from below accumulate there and cannot escape because of the water pressure. It's like they're capped with a cork. At some point, these gases can explode and fly upward like bubbles in soda. If you shake a closed soda can and then pop it open, the liquid will splash out in a fountain. Any seismic activity can affect Lake Kivu in a similar way. If something relieves that water pressure, the gases can escape too. A landslide, volcanic eruption, earthquake, drought, all of this can disrupt the structure of the lake, and then the fragile balance will break and trigger a catastrophe. So now you know how one of the rarest natural phenomena on Earth works. Fortunately, the lake is stable at the moment and there's no sign of trouble, but the danger remains. So what should we do? Should we accept the fact that toxic gases can fill everything around us at any moment? Fortunately, there's a solution to this problem. All these gases can be extracted. Some smooth pumping can neutralize the threat. No rush, just a slow, calm extraction. And it's already happening. Companies pump methane from the depths of the lake and burn it to generate electricity. It's a valuable natural resource. According to estimates, the lake contains $42 billion worth of methane. So the problem is already being solved. Is it? Many people disagree. On one hand, locals plan to increase electricity production several times, so there will be more work at methane extraction sites. On the other hand, human interference can destroy the lake's structure and trigger the release of all these gases at any moment. So what's the right thing to do? We need to look at other examples. This lake isn't unique, it's just one of the largest. There are also dangerous lakes in Cameroon and in Italy. In 1986, a limnic eruption occurred in Lake Nyos in Cameroon. A huge amount of carbon dioxide poisoned the air. It was a terrible disaster, after which people launched a project that could prevent similar events from happening again. In 2001, a team of French engineers lowered a pipe to the bottom of the lake and started pumping gas-filled water, which created a fountain of carbon dioxide. Such a miniature eruption was completely under control. In 2011, scientists added 2 more pipes, and by 2019, Lake Nyos was almost completely free of dissolved carbon dioxide. It seems that the Kivu issue is solved. Yes, it's much larger and contains much more natural gas. But what's the problem with installing numerous pipes there? In fact, everything is much more complicated. Kivu contains much more organic matter. Any lake is a bowl with trillions of microorganisms, and Lake Kivu is a huge feast for them. All the organic substances that the lake contains are eaten by small organisms and processed into methane. In addition, the volcano also produces methane, and this volcanic gas seeps into the lake through underwater rocks. Methane is much more difficult to dissolve in water than carbon dioxide, which means that its concentration accumulates over time. Then, what's the solution? So far, the best option is to carefully pump out methane and carbon dioxide. This means that geologists, physicists, chemists, and engineers must closely monitor the imbalance that occurs in the gas's pressure. You've extracted some methane and the pressure has decreased? Fix this moment and take all calculations into account in your further activity, slowly, carefully, and without any haste. It's important to extract all the gases from the lake. But what if an earthquake or volcanic eruption starts at that moment? It doesn't depend on us anymore. All we can do is monitor seismic sensors, and that's it.
Experts explain Africa is splitting in 2, and it will look like this. Up close, the process is even more shocking, with a massive crack stretching from Mozambique in the south to the Red Sea in the north. This gap keeps growing every year, tearing apart the land and destroying homes. Now, specialists believe the continent could split much sooner than we expect. Africa is breaking apart because of the Somali Plate movement. Think of it like a dramatic breakup happening with tectonic plates. On the east side, there's the Somali Plate. On the west, we have the Nubian Plate. And during this breakup, the Somali Plate just wants more space, so it's pulling away from the Nubian Plate. This movement is forming the East African Rift, a region where tectonic plates are splitting apart, magma keeps rising from deep below, and a bunch of active volcanoes are being born. So this place is hot, with daytime temperatures that can soar to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and at night they cool down to 95 degrees. Inside this hot zone, we have the Afar Triangle, also known as the Afar Depression. And its geology is fascinating, as the rifting process is causing valleys, faults, and deep cracks to form in this region. Take, for example, this massive 35-mile-long fissure in Ethiopia's desert. It's also so wide that a person can easily fit inside of it. But what's scary is this crack keeps getting bigger, growing about 1/2 inch every year. The Nubian and Somali plates moving apart could also lead to a new ocean forming in Africa. This type of process isn't something new. About 150 million years ago, when dinosaurs were still around, a similar tectonic shift created the Atlantic Ocean. The continents were once all clustered together, but when a rift formed in what was Pangaea, it started pulling them apart, splitting the east and west hemispheres. So, a similar thing is happening with this gap in Africa. At some point, experts say the waters of the Indian Ocean might flood the East African Rift Valley, eventually creating a 6th ocean. Now, it's a pity you won't be able to swim in its waters during your lifetime, though. According to geophysicist Ken McDonald, who specializes in tectonic faults, this dramatic rupture could happen in 1 to 5 million years. Trust me, that's considered fast in geologic terms, and way sooner than most experts thought. Now, even though you won't get to watch Africa breaking apart, people there will still see and feel the signs. They might experience intense volcanic eruptions and strong earthquakes as this process slowly unfolds. One example is related to that scary crack in Ethiopia's desert we mentioned earlier. The fissure was created in 2005, after the area was hit by 2 volcanic eruptions and 163 earthquakes, each with a magnitude greater than 3.9. A crack this deep and long on Earth usually takes centuries to form, but in this case, it unfolded in just a matter of days. That's how powerful this event is. In fact, this kind of intense seismic activity can speed up the African splitting process, and that's why it's so hard to predict the exact time frame for the event. What we know is that people are already calling this new land the Nubian continent. If the predictions are right, it will include Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, and part of Ethiopia. That's exciting and concerning at the same time. As new coastlines emerge, countries will need to make major adjustments when it comes to infrastructure and land management. They might lose a lot of roads, houses, and other constructions currently located near or right in the East African Rift. In Kenya, for example, the fissures tore apart a busy road, and authorities desperately tried to fill the gap with rocks and cement. In another case, an old woman was sitting and eating with her family when her house suddenly split down the middle. Recently, earthquakes that happened near Ethiopia's Afar region demolished 37 schools and forced about 5,000 students to leave their classrooms. Unfortunately, stories like this could become more common over the next few years. But there is a positive side to all this. Countries located in the middle of Africa, like Zambia and Uganda, could gain coastlines, and that might be great for them. Having a coast means they would get access to new trade routes, opening fresh economic opportunities. Plus, think about the tourism boom. With all those newly formed paradisical beaches, these countries could become the next big gateway spot for travelers. The local ecosystem in this newly created ocean will change as well, and new marine species may emerge. So let's look. This is the path where the rift is most advanced right now. I mean, we expect this is where Africa will eventually get separated. But things could get a little more complicated. Some time ago, Michael Daly, a geologist at the University of Oxford, suggested that this rift could extend further west. And some new evidence backs up his theory, pointing out that the crack could extend south through Botswana's heartland into South Africa, and west through Namibia, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. If these fractures widened into deep cracks, the ocean might come in and fill the gaps. Experts say Africa could split so much that it becomes an archipelago. But then again, we won't see that happening. It will take tens of millions of years for this to play out. We already know that Africa is at risk of breaking into a bunch of huge islands or small continents. The news isn't great for Madagascar either, as the world's 4th largest island could end up being split in half. But can the opposite process happen? I mean, can new land appear as the Nubian and Somali plates move apart? Well, as these tectonic plates get away from each other, the magma from the Earth's mantle might rise to the surface, and when it cools, it solidifies into new land. That's how other places in the world emerged, like Iceland and the Azores. So, yeah, the same process could happen in the East African Rift, and over the long term, it is possible that the rift could create new islands. For now, all we can say is that the geology of the Afar Depression is unique. It is the most active rift system on our planet. And when I say rift system, I mean a zone where tectonic plates are pulling apart. This region brings together all kinds of events, from faults in the Earth's crust to volcanic zones to the potential formation of a 6th ocean. For experts, it's like studying the evolution of rifts up close. And since it is such an active volcanic area, it also has enormous potential for tapping into geothermal energy, that is, using heat from inside the Earth to generate electricity. 2 geothermal power plants are already producing energy in Ethiopia, one in the Ethiopian Rift Valley and the other in the Afar. Now, geologists are exploring new potential spots. When we look at that deep crack in the ground, we know it's caused by tectonic plate movement. There's no mystery there. But what we still don't fully understand is why the cracks happen exactly where they do. For example, a crack that opened up in Botswana appeared after a magnitude 6.5 earthquake back in 2017. But the epicenter wasn't in the rift zone, where the plates are moving like we would expect. Instead, it was farther south. Since it's unusual for a rift to happen without volcanic activity, this fact really challenges our traditional ideas of how continents divide. Figuring out why these cracks appear in specific spots is still a missing piece of the puzzle for experts trying to explain how Africa is splitting. Hopefully, we get some answers before the continent turns into a massive archipelago.
A giant crack, more than 2,000 miles long, is splitting open across Africa. Roads, houses, even schools are getting torn apart. Now, scientists think they've finally figured out what's causing it. An enormous column of scorching hot rock called superplume, rising from deep inside the Earth. And it's slowly pushing the land apart inch by inch. This isn't a small shift though. The continent is breaking in two, and the clue to what's going on could be hidden thousands of miles away in Hawaii. And why does the United States suddenly have a role in all of this? Hang on, we'll get there. First, it's important to know this isn't new information. Africa has been slowly splitting for about 25 million years. This is happening in a region called the East African Rift System. It stretches thousands of miles from Ethiopia down to Mozambique and is the largest active continental rift system on the planet. And by that, I mean places where the Earth's crust is being stretched and pulled apart, causing faults, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. Scary stuff to say the least. Back in 2018, for example, a massive crack appeared near a small town just west of Kenya's capital, Nairobi. In some spots, it was about 65 feet wide. That's almost the length of two school buses parked one after the other. The whole thing was terrifying. It happened fast and left a trail of destruction. Roads were cut off, farms torn apart. People were on edge as the ground opened up beneath their feet. And I mean that quite literally. One man watched the crack rip straight through his home. He barely had time to grab a few of his belongings before his entire house collapsed. Sounds terrifying, right? Since it happened in the East African Rift region, panic spread fast. The media was all over it, claiming it was proof that Africa is splitting apart. People standing near the crack thought, oh boy, it's already happening. And many still believe that today. But that's not actually the case. At least not with that particular crack. Because after the initial panic, videos and photos of it revealed clues that it wasn't related to tectonic plate movement. First clue, the two sides of the crack didn't match. Like trying to fit the wrong puzzle pieces together. They simply didn't line up. Second clue, the gap wasn't one continuous line. There was some kind of soil bridges in between. All this showed it was sudden erosion. I mean, some specialists believe the crack had once been filled with volcanic ash from nearby Mount Longonot. But then the region was hit with heavy rains. When water soaked through the soil, it washed the ash away, leaving the gap exposed. Problem solved. Even after the truth came out, it was too late. This event brought the whole Africa is splitting talk back. And here's the thing. Even though that crack had nothing to do with it, make no mistake, Africa is breaking apart. That's because the continent sits between two tectonic plates, the Somali plate in the east and the Nubian plate in the west. The problem is they're moving away from each other, and as they drift apart, the gap in the East African Rift keeps getting wider. Eventually, the Somali plate could split completely from the Nubian plate, creating an entirely new landmass, something on the scale of Madagascar or even New Zealand. You don't have to worry though. This process is super slow. So slow that none of us will see it finished. Experts say the continent is moving apart by about 0.3 inches a year in some places. To give you an idea, that's less than the length of your fingernail. So we can say this split will take millions of years, which is good news for the people living there. But that doesn't mean they won't feel the effects of this slow break. In fact, they're already happening. Take Ethiopia's Afar region, for example. Back in 2005, this area showed just how unpredictable the rift can be. In a short period, 420 earthquakes hit the area, opening up a massive fissure. What usually takes centuries happened in just a few days, completely challenging what scientists thought they knew about the speed of geological changes. Back then, the crack stretched for more than 35 miles, and life around it is still far from easy. Recent earthquakes destroyed much of the local infrastructure. 37 schools were damaged, leaving 5,000 students without classrooms. And that was just one part of the damage. As the tectonic plates keep moving apart, water will eventually flood into this region, creating a brand new ocean, according to some predictions. Countries like Zambia and Uganda, which are landlocked today, could one day have a coastline. That could be great news for them, as it might open up new trade routes and completely reshape their economies. Don't get too excited though. We won't be diving into the waters of this sixth ocean anytime soon. The splitting process will take another 5 to 10 million years. But it's tough to say exactly when, since big seismic events, like earthquakes, could make it all happen faster. So here's what we know. The Somali Plate and the Nubian Plate are in the middle of a dramatic tectonic breakup, slowly moving apart. Africa is breaking in two. Earth will probably gain a new ocean because of it. But until recently, we didn't know exactly what was triggering all of this. Like, yeah, those tectonic plates are moving, but why? I mean, is this massive geological process being driven by something happening in Earth's mantle? Or could it have a much larger, deeper source? Well, scientists think they may have finally cracked the mystery. They believe the continent is breaking apart because there's a deep mantle superplume, a huge column of hot rock beneath the East African Rift system. Think of it as a massive subterranean hammer pushing upward, pressing against the crust, and slowly cracking it apart. But here's the interesting thing. Scientists reached that conclusion thanks to something that happened in a completely different part of the world, Hawaii. Under this US state, there's also a plume of super hot rock rising from deep inside the planet. It melts the crust above it, and that's what fuels Hawaii's volcanoes. As the Pacific Plate drifts over this plume, molten rock breaks through in new spots, creating volcano after volcano. Over millions of years, that's how the Hawaiian Islands were formed. This Hawaiian plume contains noble gases like helium and neon. And you know where else scientists found those same gases? That's right, beneath the East African Rift system. Bingo! That discovery backed up the theory that a superplume is driving what's happening in Africa. And we call it super because it might be massive. You see, these same gases have been found in volcanic rocks from Kenya all the way down to Malawi. So everything points to the existence of a single superplume that stretches from the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea, not a bunch of several isolated sources. If their data and research are correct, scientists estimate that this superplume beneath Africa likely starts at the core mantle boundary, which is located about 1,800 miles deep inside the Earth. While the East African Rift system's chemical signatures are similar to those found in volcanic rocks in Hawaii, they're not identical. The Hawaiian plume is thought to be a narrow, rising stream of hot mantle, a bit like the movement inside a lava lamp. Africa's plume might be shaped differently, more like a large mass of hot, buoyant material rising from deep within the Earth. As it reaches the surface, this hot material hits the colder, solid outer layer and spreads out, pushing hard enough to crack it open and trigger intense volcanic activity across the region. And if this theory is right, we're watching a slow but unstoppable force that will redraw Africa's map and change the continent forever.
So look at this narrow passage between the north of Morocco and the southern part of the Spanish region. It's called the Strait of Gibraltar. There are only 8 miles between the two continents, but for some reason, there's no bridge, despite people having been dreaming for centuries about connecting these two regions. There are places in the world where a bridge over water stretches for a much greater distance. For example, the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway near New Orleans, Louisiana, goes for 24 miles, which is 3 times the length of the hypothetical bridge between Africa and Europe. That's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest continuous bridge passing over water. It consists of 2 parallel bridges and connects the urban area of New Orleans with small settlements in the north of Lake Pontchartrain. 9,000 concrete piles hold more than 1,000 decks above the water. This large-scale structure was built in the middle of the 20th century. It only took 14 months from the start of construction to its completion. American engineers created a unique technology for attaching concrete piles to the base of the bridge, and this bridge is still functioning. So, what's the problem with building a shorter bridge to connect Africa and Europe? Let's first find out the value of the 8-mile bridge that could connect 2 continents and the reason why everyone is talking about it. In fact, the value of such a bridge would be enormous. Diamonds, oil, minerals. Africa is full of valuable materials, and Europe is happy to buy these things. This theoretical bridge could allow people to transport things for trade quickly and comfortably. But now, the exchange of goods between Africa and Europe is only possible thanks to airplanes and cargo ships, and airplanes are extremely expensive because of hefty fuel price tags. In addition, air travel is often delayed because of bad weather. There are long customs procedures and transportation from the airport to the destination. Ships can also be a problem. The narrow area of the Mediterranean Sea, where the 2 continents are closest to each other, is a dangerous place because of storms and strong currents. The transportation of your diamonds is highly dependent on weather conditions. The second advantage of such a bridge would be the creation of tens of thousands of jobs. People from Europe and Africa would build hotels, ports, parks, and even small towns for each other. The coastal parts of both continents would become a new economic center. And just imagine how much investment those places would attract. Europe and Africa would be much closer than ever before. You could drive from a small Spanish town to a safari park in northern Morocco, buy Moroccan tea, get some argan oil, and go home for the evening. Or you could take a high-speed train across the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. People would open hundreds of restaurants, amusement parks, shopping malls, and a museum next to this bridge. But, unfortunately, it's impossible to build such a bridge, at least at the moment. And here's why. The main problem is the Strait of Gibraltar itself, because of its strong currents and seismic activity. How can you start large-scale construction if, in a couple of days, an underwater earthquake can trigger giant waves and take all the ships underwater? Even if you build a bridge, rapid streams of water that constantly change direction can shake the entire structure and tear the connecting parts of the construction. The bridge over the Strait of Gibraltar must have a strong, sturdy system that will withstand seismic activity. Huge resources are required to create such a complex structure. Despite the dangerous passage between the 2 continents, it remains one of the busiest points in the world. It's the only place on the planet connecting the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. About 300 ships pass through this area every day. Not only merchant ships, but also fishing vessels and tourist boats. There are not so many places in the world where you can watch whales coming out of the water. Not only people, but also marine creatures often visit this passage because of the peculiarities of the sea currents. But we'll talk about that later. Another problem is the depth of the strait. In simple words, any bridge over the water is built on long metal piles. Builders and engineers stick piles into the seabed and use them as a holding base for the whole construction. But installing such piles firmly enough is a difficult task because of the uneven seabed. The seabed has a unique geological landscape, irregularities, and different densities of the Earth's rock. There are also reefs, rocks, and pits. Any seabed requires extensive geological studies before piles are installed. However, the bottom of the Strait of Gibraltar is especially difficult because of its depth, almost 3,000 feet. It's one of the deepest straits in the whole world. Just imagine, you'll need the height of 10 Statues of Liberty to reach the surface of the water from the bottom of the strait. What kind of pile should be used there to hold the entire bridge? Most likely, one pile will have to consist of several parts connected into one large metal rod. And don't forget about seismic activity. Let's say you've installed perfectly strong piles, but the next day an earthquake occurs and destroys the entire structure, and a strong current is carrying fortifications all over the Mediterranean Sea. The next problem is probably the most important one, because it concerns marine life. The Strait of Gibraltar has a high salt content. This natural element makes water heavier and makes it descend to the bottom of the deep Mediterranean basin. Then, this salt water pushes up cold water from the seabed into the Atlantic Ocean. These changes in water density, as well as fast currents, create sea vortices and turbulence. It's like a raging cauldron of cold water that raises a lot of nutrients to the surface. The hollows and hills of the Strait of Gibraltar are filled with different substances and sunlight, and this creates ideal conditions for the formation of phytoplankton. Whales, dolphins, and other marine creatures adore this delicacy. That's why you can see about 7 species of whales and dolphins in this place. What might happen to phytoplankton after the start of global construction? Carbon dioxide, crushed rock, tons of dust and ashes, falling building materials. All of this could significantly pollute the environment. Without phytoplankton, many fish would go extinct. Without fish, thousands of fishers wouldn't be able to get food and earn money. But even if the bridge was built, cars and trains would continue to pollute the air and water. This disruption of the delicate balance in this narrow strait can lead to larger-scale environmental disasters. Dolphins and whales may leave to look for food elsewhere, and thus take resources from other marine inhabitants. Like falling dominoes, one problem can follow another. And all this because of one bridge. In 2007, the Spanish Ministry of Environmental Protection introduced speed limits for all ships sailing through the strait in order to not disrupt the delicate balance of nature. At the beginning of the 20th century, a French engineer proposed a project of a bridge, but it was rejected because it was too complicated and costly. People also tried to develop a 23-mile-long tunnel, but this project also faced financial and technical difficulties. People are still dreaming of a bridge over the Strait of Gibraltar. Perhaps, in the future, when we develop cooler technologies, we'll be able to build this thing. Oh, by the way, there hasn't always been water between these two regions. In the distant past, the two continents were connected. The entire Mediterranean Sea is the remains of the Tethys Sea that existed before the era of dinosaurs. Then the African and Indian plates collided with the Eurasian one, and the Tethys Sea completely disappeared. In its place, a land bridge was formed that separated the Mediterranean Sea from the ocean. Without access to water, the sea dried up about 6 million years ago. But then, when the bridge came down, the water began to fill the dried-up pool. For tens of thousands of years, the narrow plate sank lower and lower, and the Mediterranean Sea eventually got its current water levels. Get ready, because one of the Pacific Ocean's most active volcanoes might blow any minute now. Scientists monitoring Axial Seamount, a gigantic underwater lava factory just off the coast of Oregon, say it could erupt literally any time between today and early 2026 at the latest. Yes, it's underwater, but don't get tricked by the ocean's cover. This beast is almost 3 times taller than the Empire State Building. This volcano is inflating like a souffle at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and scientists are so excited they will live stream it. Seriously! So, here's the thing. This volcano will explode at any moment now because, well, it's inflating fast. Over the past few months, researchers have noticed that the seafloor is literally rising. It's like Axial is doing its best impression of a waterbed filled with molten rock. Scientists call this inflation, which sounds like something you'd complain about after Thanksgiving dinner. But in volcano terms, it means magma is piling up underground, causing the seafloor to bulge like a souffle that's this close to collapsing. Now, an underwater volcanic eruption might not sound so exotic. After all, Most volcanic activity on Earth happens under the sea. Believe it or not, there are more than 1 million submarine volcanoes quietly churning lava beneath the waves as you watch this. The ocean floor is Earth's biggest volcanic hotspot. What makes Axial Seamount so thrilling is that it's under intense scientific surveillance, unlike any other underwater volcano. It's like the star player in a volcanic reality show, with a network of ocean bottom instruments giving researchers real-time updates on magma movements, seismic tremors, and crust deformation. In fact, Axial Seamount hosts the world's first-ever underwater volcanic laboratory. Scientists have been keeping a constant eye on it since the 1990s, when they installed sensors that now relay live data straight from the seafloor. This kind of monitoring is unheard of elsewhere and has turned Axial into a geological celebrity, one whose behavior we can track with remarkable precision. Besides, Axial is hilariously predictable. It erupts roughly every decade, and right on cue, it's gearing up for another performance. By mid-2024, it had inflated to nearly the same level as before its last eruption, which means the countdown is on. Scientists are so confident in its schedule that they've set up a volcanic advent calendar, waiting for the day when Axial decides to pop. But hold on, Axial Seamount isn't just your average underwater volcano. It's got style, personality, and a geological identity of its own. Now, most underwater volcanoes, called seamounts, tend to look like cones or flattened domes. Axial laughs in the face of tradition with its unfashionably rectangular caldera, a 2-by-5-mile crater that looks like it was designed by a geologist with a ruler and a grudge against curves. Most volcanoes opt for the classic circular look, but Axial, it went full avant-garde. This caldera is punctuated by fissures, vents, lava channels, and mysterious dome-like structures that rise hundreds of feet high. It's like the volcano's wearing a funky geometrical crown instead of the usual rounded hat. What's more, Axial's location is like prime real estate for geological fireworks. It sits right where two major forces collide, literally. First, it's on the Juan de Fuca Ridge, an underwater mountain range formed where two tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart, like a zipper being undone. Second, it's perched atop the Cobb Hotspot, a deep mantle plume that acts like Earth's sneaky magma espresso machine, pumping molten rock from deep inside the planet and fueling a whole chain of seamounts. To put it plainly, it's like the tectonic plates are reluctant dance partners, sliding away from each other, while the Cobb Hotspot acts as the DJ, turning up the heat and keeping the magma party going. This dual influence creates a complex plumbing system inside the volcano, with magma chambers filling, draining, and shifting in ways scientists are still trying to decode. The competition between the spreading plates and upwelling magma is what gives Axial its unique geological fingerprint, and it's also why this volcano keeps surprising us. Now, we said that Axial Summit isn't just a crater. The truth is that inside, the action gets even weirder and cooler. Well, hotter, but you get it. Axial hosts black smoker hydrothermal vents, which blast superheated water at temperatures exceeding 700 degrees Fahrenheit. This is no ordinary underwater hot tub. These vents create one of Earth's most extreme environments, where bizarre creatures thrive in total darkness and scalding heat. Giant tube worms, crabs, colonies of bacteria, and even octopuses live off the mineral-rich plumes that gush from these vents, forming ecosystems completely independent from sunlight and photosynthesis. It's like an alien world beneath the waves, thriving off the volcano's fiery breath. These vent communities are crucial to science, not just because they're strange, but because they may resemble the earliest ecosystems on Earth. Some researchers believe life on our planet may have originated in similar deep-sea hydrothermal environments billions of years ago. Studying them could also help us search for life on icy moons, like Europa and Enceladus, where similar vents might exist beneath their frozen surfaces. When Axial erupts, it's like a natural reset button for these communities. The lava wipes everything out, but within months, life comes roaring back. Proof that even in the most hostile environments, real estate is always in demand. For those worrying about tsunamis or coastal disasters, relax. Axial eruptions are the underwater equivalent of a slow cooker. The immense water pressure keeps things chill, well, scalding, but not explosive. So the worst thing that happens is some lava decorates the seafloor, and a few crabs have to find new vents to squat in. This means no massive ash clouds or explosive blasts that could reach the surface. Instead, lava oozes out and spreads across the seafloor, sometimes traveling for miles. But for scientists, this eruption is the golden ticket. Understanding axial patterns could help predict eruptions elsewhere, even on land. Plus, its bizarre ecosystems offer clues about how life might survive on other planets. Not bad for a volcano that mostly just sits around looking rectangular. Still, the volcano's activity can be heard in the form of thousands of small earthquakes every day. Thousands! As if the volcano itself was groaning and creaking, preparing to burst open. Again, we won't feel a thing, but at least they'll help scientists track the magma's movements and the volcano's eruptive cycle. Now, one of the coolest parts of this story is that scientists are preparing to live stream Axial's next eruption for the first time ever. Imagine watching an undersea volcano in action, live, as it's painting the ocean floor with fresh lava. It's like a front row seat to a natural fireworks display, thousands of feet beneath the waves. The live stream will come courtesy of the Ocean Observatory's initiative, which maintains a series of fiber optic cables linking Axial's instruments directly to shore. It's the Wi-Fi of the deep sea, and it's about to broadcast molten rock in HD. And there's another twist. Scientists have noticed a curious pattern in Axial's eruptions. All three of its most recent eruptions, in 1998, 2011, and 2015, happened between January and April, the months when Earth starts moving away from the Sun. So why? Well, it might have something to do with the Moon's gravitational pull. The Moon's orbit causes ocean tides to rise and fall, which changes the pressure on the seafloor and could help nudge the magma chamber to its breaking point. I guess the Moon isn't just a romantic light in the night sky. It might be the ultimate volcanic whisperer. So, one thing's for sure, when Axial goes, it'll be the best documented underwater eruption in history. So, keep your eyes peeled. This is one natural spectacle you won't want to miss. And who knows, if we're lucky, we might even get deep-sea eruption ASMR out of the deal. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be refreshing the live feed like it's a Taylor Swift ticket sale.